Welcome to DreamSpeak. Before we get started today, we want to say a special thank you to our listeners in Indianapolis, Indiana, Budapest, Hungary, Gold Coast in Australia, Gothenburg, Sweden, Ljubljana, Slovenia, and Stirling in the UK. We couldn't do it without you.
Hi, dreamers. Thank you for learning with us today on DreamSpeak. I'm Rika.
And I'm Thomas.
And this is the podcast about dreams that teaches you a complete system to help you listen to your dreams and get the guidance they're providing you every day.
In this episode of DreamSpeak, it's holiday time when the worst happens. The family has been involved in a car wreck. In fact, it's 2 car wrecks with different groups of relatives. One of them is barely scathed, while the other is seriously injured. Why? Come along for the ride and find out.
Thomas, you had a dream last night that you wanted to share with our listeners.
What happened in the dream was I was together with family, which I actually think was from your side. So our kids and grandkids, and I had mentioned Christmas. So I knew it was a holiday. It was like a holiday season of togetherness. It didn't feel really elaborate. I was just vaguely aware that that was the reason for our being together.
Hmm?
And then there had been a car accident. And so obviously all of us were worried and flustered. Your kids came back and they were just in a fender bender. Everyone was fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. But then I was shocked to find out in that moment that some of our extended family in a separate vehicle had been in a major car accident. And they also pulled up. So the car was still moving, but it was totaled. And these people, starting with, I think, 2 men, they got out and they were both badly injured and bleeding. And one of them was so injured that he collapsed on the ground. And I was watching because it was too fast for me to catch him or anything. And I was like, oh, thank God he didn't hit his head, but he was coughing up blood.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was pretty unnerving. And, obviously it was a big emergency. And then there were 3 children in the car and they also got out and they were all hurt.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was like, oh, this is terrible. And it was just really shocking. So I had my phone in this dream, which is unusual for me. I don't dream about cell phones very much. And I was actually able to use it. I remember that part of it being a bit vivid because I normally don't do that. You often have phones show up in your dreams.
That don't work.
Yeah. Well, mine seemed to be working, but not perfectly. So I needed to call 911 and I was aware of that. And so I tried to dial it and then it didn't work. And then I dialed it and it did work, but it actually took me to voicemail.
Oh.
So I was like, great.
911?
911 just was like, leave a message.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, man. Anyway, so the only other thing that I remember about the dream is that car was a matte gray car that seemed kind of old. And then after the 911 and everything and just leaving a message, I was trying to underline with it was just all men, the adults in the car. There were no moms or anything present for these children.
Mm-hmm.
But I did feel that the children belonged to these men, like they were the fathers. And I was trying to reason with 2 of them, not the one that collapsed on the ground. He kind of disappeared from the narrative. But as I was drawing closer to these people, when they had first gotten out of the car, I realized that they weren't really recognizable, but I recognized them as part of our extended family. Like you might think about cousins or something I hadn't seen in a while. But then as I started drawing closer to them and interacting with them and trying to get them to realize that they were in a full-blown emergency and they couldn't just neglect to go to the doctor or something, that they all immediately needed medical attention, I realized they actually weren't related to us.
Oh.
It was this very interesting dreamlike transition of being like, this is my extended family, and then realizing I don't know these people. And then I asked one of them his name, and it was Pico.
Huh.
Pico.
Okay.
So we can talk about associations that I might have with that word. Isn't that a word that shows up in that spelling bee puzzle? P-I-C-O-T or something like that?
I don't know.
I'm just going to look that up. Yeah. Pico is a small loop or series of small loops of twisted thread in lace or embroidery, typically decorating the border. Okay. So it's got to do with embroidery. Anyway, so that was his name, and I knew he was French,
Okay.
which was interesting. He spoke English, but he spoke it with a French accent. And then as we continued talking, my only message was, you have to call 911. They were both being really irresponsible about it. They're like, oh, like, we're pretty okay. And I was like, you are not okay. And I was like, you have head injuries. Your kids have head injuries. If you have a microscopic brain bleed, somebody could die. Like, you have to be thoroughly examined now. Like, this is a full-blown emergency. And then this other guy who I knew even less than Pico, who just felt like a complete stranger that I thought a few minutes before was part of my family, he was really obstinate and kind of passive aggressive. And he said, well, I guess we'll just die then. And what he basically meant was we might as well give up.
Mm.
It was like he didn't even understand that we could easily just get an ambulance and, he just wanted to throw his hands up and quit.
Oh,
So that's all I remember about this dream.
okay. So,
I woke up kind of upset.
yeah. And why was it so upsetting? Besides, the obvious, you don't really like blood. You kind of freak out about blood. Why do you think you were so upset?
I think it's really just the obvious, not just the fact that I don't like blood, but the fact that this was a crisis.
Mm.
I woke up feeling like, oh, this is bad.
Uh-huh.
The idea of needing to call 911 was scary.
So you were thinking that there was something in your life where you were at a crisis.
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
So,
And that's why I wanted to talk to you about it
yeah,
and get it sorted out.
yes, I think that's a great idea. So this is the first time I'm hearing about your dream, and so we'll just take it from the beginning where we would usually go with a new dream. Maybe we can start with the people because you were saying it was family in the one car, and then these other people you thought were family, but they actually weren't, that were actually the ones that were hurt badly.
That's right.
So what do you think about the people? I mean, what are your associations with the family?
So, family in a dream, the universal meaning is basically they're parts of us that we have soul lessons to. Well, we use those parts of us to learn our soul lessons in life. And they're parts of us that we might create with frequently if there's a romantic partner there. If we have children, they're very important ideas that are developing within us. If we have grandparents in the dream, they can be super conscious aspects about our lineage or about our beliefs about the world around us that have shaped us. If it's brothers and sisters and that sort of thing, uncles, aunts, they're parts of our consciousness and our subconsciousness that have been present in our life basically from early on, parts that are really core to who we are. And so the thing was, the only family members I remember, now I know you were around, but I don't remember you being a character in the dream. I just remember your son-in-law getting out of the car, and I didn't see anyone else, but I had the feeling that our grandkids were with them and stuff like that. And so I guess it might help to just zoom in on him. He's just a very responsible man. He's very hardworking, and he just is a very traditional family man.
Mm.
And so that basically is a part of my consciousness.
Uh-huh.
I've got this very hardworking, traditional part of me that has these other aspects connected to it, including some really important developing parts of me.
Mm.
It's like I know that trend within myself, which is kind of a maturation sort of trend, which, for me, I'm 40 years old. So maybe the maturing should be over with, but it's not, first of all. But I also really don't think that that's a fair way to look at oneself for anybody. Because like Confucius said, and my grandmother for that matter, I really believe we continue maturing throughout our life, and every decade of our life, optimally, there would be more added to ourselves, that there's more depth for us to access. There's more ways that we can contribute and evolve. Our self-awareness evolves, et cetera, et cetera. So this is clearly related to my maturation, but basically it's saying these are parts of me that are going through that process in a healthy way, and it's going well.
Mm-hmm.
And they were completely unhurt.
Mm.
But then all these other aspects that I had mistakenly thought were connected to me, like a family,
Mm-hmm.
were very badly dinged up. They really needed medical attention urgently, or they might die.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't we remind our listeners what death is about?
Well, Death in a Dream, and I think we've had this on our YouTube channel. We've talked about it in videos. It's about change. It's changing from one form to another. It's not, nothing ever disappears. It just changes form. So that's what death indicates in a dream.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And so one kind of simple way to think of this is these particular aspects, which we can probably, even though they're really strangers to me in the end, we can probably get some information from interpreting them. They could, if they didn't take responsibility for themselves, they could change. And those parts of me then would not really be active in my life anymore. They'd be de-emphasized. They'd kind of go away as if they were dead. It just wouldn't be important anymore. And I think that was where I've started to realize what this dream might be about.
Okay.
When things come in twos in a dream, it's often about showing a contrast to get us thinking about that contrast.
Yeah, duality or opposites.
So there were two car accidents that essentially took place within the same very short span of time that both involved my family, or so I thought. But they're a big contrast to the passengers and the outcome. So what I've come to realize is, in all likelihood, some event in my life, which is represented by the car crash, affected different parts of me in two very different ways.
Oh, that's interesting.
The passengers in the first car are important within my life and my personal growth for the reasons I just said. But these passengers in the second car, I have a really strong suspicion that actually it would be better maybe if they did die. That maybe they're not really helpful for me.
Well, I think we should get a little more information on what these people in the second car could represent. Like, who's Pico and why is he French? And what does that mean? I mean, I know we just watched the Olympics recently, and, that took place in Paris. So, there was an emphasis on France, but do you think it could have anything to do with that?
Yes, I think that's great insight. And you and I also were fortunate enough to do some vacationing in Europe this summer. And we didn't go to France, but we have talked about France. We talked about France while we were in Europe. So this is going to be a great example of how important it is to always really bring all your personal associations to bear and how they can start to reveal things. Because I don't know if I mentioned this, but did I say that Pico seemed to grow elf ears while we were talking?
No, I do not think you mentioned elf ears. I think I would have remembered that.
So that actually is going to help too, I think. It's what we call an uncanny symbol.
And does this have to do with Lord of the Rings?
Yes,
Okay.
it does. And actually, that might be the simplest entry point, but I don't necessarily want to rush to that because I want to show how all these different parts will kind of layer to sort of paint one picture, because I think they're going to. But yeah, he kind of had pointy ears like an elf, but then while we were talking, and him and this other guy were being completely ridiculous about getting an ambulance and how important that was, his elf ear kind of started to get longer. And it was really obviously trying to be like, don't forget, this guy has elf ears, pay attention. That's what uncanny symbols do.
Yeah.
They stand out to try to make sure we remember them so that we can try to get the meaning from that. And sometimes the uncanny symbols can really help unlock a dream. And I think that's going to help with this. So the thing that's interesting about this is I knew in the family car, we had a family, mother, father, kids. In this car, my dream really wanted me to be clear. There's just men, adult men, very irresponsible. And these children have come to harm because of their irresponsibility. So adult men for me are all conscious aspects.
Right.
So we know there's not a creative partnership going on like there would be with a mother and a father. There is just this kind of conscious thought-based forcing going on. I'm doing something with my consciousness which is not helping me, is what I've realized from the presence of men with no women trying to take care of these children. And it's trying to show me these negative thoughts, which we're going to try to interpret and see if we can figure out what they are, have given rise to another generation, so to speak, that's going to grow up and continue these negative thought patterns.
Ooh, that doesn't sound good.
No, the three children, right? So it's very intense interpreting dreams for a lot of reasons. But, in this case, it might be better if those children didn't exist, is my suspicion. We'll see. And so it feels weird when you're interpreting a dream to be like, well, it might be better if these children were laid to rest. You would never think that in your waking life.
No.
But in a dream, that is not anything too unusual.
No.
They're just parts of me that might be unhelpful, that I don't want to further nurture and develop.
Right.
So anyway, let's see if we can try to get to the bottom of what these three adult men were all about.
Yeah.
So two of them I talked to, and one had just passed out. He was so injured. And these two, the one was French. The other one's going to be harder to interpret because all I remember off of him was just that intense feeling of irresponsibility and resignation. So we have two energies to help already because it's probably parts of my consciousness that are very resigned and passive aggressive and irresponsible, right? These don't sound like very good tendencies. So those are parts of me. And then the French one, it's about this dharmic issue that I have of reaching for things that are just out of my grasp and focusing way too much on that. We used the example from a big dream that was given to me right when we moved to Colorado in our video that's titled Big Dreams and talks about why they're important and life-defining in some cases, as that dream was for me. And so I know that that's something I need to work on, is not grasping after things that are just out of my reach, putting my focus on the present moment and what I can do to contribute to the world and to be happier right now, in the here and now. The France thing does tie to the Olympics, I think, because when enjoying that, I think it got my mind going in a very passive way because I'm just watching television, being like, it would be so cool to go to the Olympics. Like, what if we were there? You know, it's just that craving.
Yeah.
Just idle craving.
Yeah.
And that was very similar to why Lord of the Rings imagery is in this, because when I was in college and really having, in some ways, the hardest time of my life, lacking direction, lacking any kind of focus, and really just being down in the dumps, I used to watch it a lot.
Watch what?
Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
And just by myself, you know, just I would watch it. And the reason why is because I was looking for a source of hope instead of actually actively doing anything to give myself hope.
I see.
Yeah. So that kind of fantasizing, just ruminating, not good.
Yeah.
Right. And now I know that that's not good and I don't let myself fall into that ordinarily. But this dream is trying to show me you have hit some sort of a crisis point that's going to be represented by the car accident. And then two different things have happened. The part of you really need, this family, you know, with the balance, with the maturity, with the hard work, it's going to be fine. For that part of you, it's just a little bump in the road. But for this part of you that is irresponsible, what else have I said?
Passive aggressive and resigned.
Yeah. And so I think what it's trying to show me is that these parts of me have sort of been reactivated by some recent crisis in my life, but that this crisis has also actually really harmed those parts of me. And so what I think that this is trying to say is fantasizing about some time or some hypothetical future, or if I had this or if I experienced that, it's a very feeble coping mechanism. It does me no good.
Right.
In the face of a real life problem, it just does nothing but saps my energy. And so in some ways, I think the most important message of this dream was the evolution of me thinking, oh, this is my extended family, to getting close to these aspects of myself, physically close, and realizing I'm not related to these aspects at all. They're strangers. They're strangers.
Yeah.
And so it's like I'm disowning them psychologically.
Well, that's good.
Yes. Yeah, there's a confusion there because sometimes when people talk in just general conversation about psychology, you don't want to really disown parts of yourself and like repress them into the shadow.
Right.
That's not really what I'm implying by that. What I mean is like saying, hey, you know, these are just very minor parts of my story, and I don't use these things as kind of a means of escape and coping anymore. I don't need them. So we should probably talk about what that crisis might be, because that catalyzed this entire dream.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty deep stuff.
It's personal. We've been having kind of a rough patch in our relationship.
Yep.
Yeah. Fortunately, it's been rare for us, but not unprecedented.
Nope. And all of those rough patches really strengthen our relationship in the long term.
That's right. And we're both holding to that hope and trying our best to use the tools that we've developed, including dream interpretation, which is helping us right now, live at this moment,
Yes.
to move forward, to feel, more confident, like we've got solid ground under our feet.
Well, we've been asking, for help, guidance through our dreams, and we both had pretty powerful dreams this morning that gave us some guidance and help, I guess.
Yep. And so I'm pretty sure that that's what the car accident is, because the urgency of it emotionally, the urge to call 911, that's uncommon for me to have that kind of sort of emotional intensity in a dream without it being a nightmare, which, it's interesting too. You should watch our video about nightmares if you're curious, because I've noticed over all these years that dreams can kind of wander their way into transforming into a nightmare. If the problem that we were encountering was being handled perhaps less responsibly by me or with less urgency,
Mhm.
this could have turned into a nightmare from
Yeah,
that point, you know?
for
But
sure.
it didn't. And I think what that's trying to tell me is that as far as my part in us working this out, I'm doing okay, but that I need to really keep focusing and work on it. I think the real core message is basically like, make sure you're bringing the right parts of yourself to the table. Because again, it's just a bump in the road for the actual people in our family.
Mhm.
They're fine. So I am doing fine on that level. With the good parts of me,
Mhm.
I'm coping well and we're moving forward.
Mhm.
So that's really encouraging, actually.
It's just the passive aggressive and the
Irresponsible,
irresponsible and
resigned.
yeah,
Yeah,
resigned parts
right.
of you that are not helpful.
Hmm. And I think, again, that act of realizing, you know what it was? That's what it was. It wasn't an act of willpower. Like I didn't go and kill them. That wasn't what happened in this dream. It was an act of realization. And that must have been what I got as my gift from doing our ecstatic dance yesterday.
Ah, yes.
I don't know if we've talked about that practice on the show, but we run our own ecstatic dance, but it's five rhythms inspired. Neither of us is a trained facilitator, but five rhythms is a little different than what some listeners may have experienced on the ecstatic dance scene. They're both wonderful practices. We recommend that you try them. But five rhythms has perhaps a more explicitly spiritual emphasis and more of a highly structured container around the intent of the dancing,
Mhm.
but it's still free from any choreography. It's just a free form of expression. But that practice has become like a moving meditation for me for
Mhm.
more than a decade now. It's a regular thing that we do.
And we've been hosting it monthly for the last 5.5 years,
Hmm.
which has been a wonderful gift and something that we enjoy sharing with our community here.
Yeah. And so I always get a lot of good spiritual work done during the dance.
Mhm.
And I guess that's what it was. I guess in my somatic practice yesterday, even though I didn't realize it, I must have been gradually coming to a big realization, which was that I need to kind of dump these shadowy anti-coping mechanisms, these maladaptive ways of coping that are completely ineffective and don't help me sort of survive a crisis, if you will.
Yeah, not helpful.
Hmm. Cool contrast, because
Yeah.
our family was barely hurt. No one was hurt. They weren't hurt at all. It was just like, we need to call the insurance company.
Uh-huh.
And then these, more hollow parts of myself were just so hurt,
Mhm.
on the verge of dying potentially.
Yeah.
That third guy, I don't know what the deal is, but the number three usually has to do with expansion and growth. And there were three kids too.
Mhm.
So
And
I don't know why there'd be three.
creation.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Maybe it was trying to just make me think of the number three in terms of if you could maybe get loose from this or maybe have this realization that the dream showed me. The real is, in other words, maybe the key is to the whole dream, the realization that you have just had could lead to some really healthy new things in your life, some new creations.
Yeah.
Maybe stop using these maladaptive coping strategies while we're dealing with the issues that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
No sulking.
No.
Yeah. And no, worrying that it's all going to come crashing down and just, being like, I give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. None of that.
None of that.
Because it won't. And the dream gives me tremendous reassurance because I have a deep heart connection, a deep feeling of love and care for the family that was in the other car.
Mhm.
And so the dream's saying, you're good. You're fine. This is a bump in the road.
Yeah. Well, that's really encouraging.
It is. Because I was really scared when I woke up from the dream this morning.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just spend a little bit of time about talking to see if we can figure out why would that have been frightening. First off, just on a simple level, just like with nightmares, the dream wanted to make sure I remembered it.
Yeah.
Fear is a potent way to get things into your memory.
Well, also, other times when we've had dreams of accidents, that's concerning because you worry about, oh, your physical health, your safety, what's happened, is there some kind of crisis? So it's scary when you wake up when you've had, an accident in a dream.
I think one of the subtle messages here, which we haven't gotten to yet, may be that my dream was trying to help me, or my soul was trying to help me realize I'm focused on the wrong things sometimes, right? I was really worried about the well-being of these parts of myself.
Mm-hmm.
But what I take from that ultimately is it's like a shadowy ego-based concern of saying, well, how will I cope without these? I need these. These are the ways I know how to cope.
Mm.
But the dream's like, no, you know how to cope much better than that.
Yeah. You actually do have a responsible part of you and a mature part of you.
Yeah. That's in balance and working through this just fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems very positive. That's encouraging.
And I guess in a certain sense, it's kind of like it helps me feel less anxiety about the issue in my waking life, similar to the way that it worked with my emotions in the dream. When we're sleeping, I feel like we're really raw and honest. And sometimes you'll feel emotional energy much more intensely while you're asleep, whereas just to function and go through daily life, we often suppress intense emotions while we're awake.
Yep.
So this emotion came out. And so it might be saying, hey, you've been feeling a lot of fear and anxiety around these relationship issues,
Uh-huh.
but you don't need to worry. Here's why you might be feeling that, but it's kind of illusory.
Mm-hmm.
You're fine. You're stable, and you've got a good, stable base under you, and you can get past this.
Much of life is delusory. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much of the things that we worry about,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of our cares and concerns ultimately turn out to be somewhat essenceless.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that I'm not ruled by my cares and concerns, as this dream clearly illustrates.
Well, you're human. It's okay.
Thanks.
So you still haven't told me what Pico means.
Okay, so we found out that Pico is a type of embroidery.
Okay.
Okay, and we know that because we play that word game on New York Times, Spelling Bee. There's been a word on there more than once.
Okay.
So just a random little thing that stuck in my mind.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the game is just an idle pastime.
Mm-hmm.
It has no lasting value. It is a nice little bonding experience for us
Yeah.
to do that together. No harm there. I mean, I think that's probably good. But I think part of the deal is that it's actually at this point, just like anything that you pattern yourself or habituate yourself to, it's easy to just kind of waste time with too many word games.
Uh-huh.
It's not hard, to put too much energy and focus into that. Same with Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
Same with me thinking about being at the Olympics for no real reason.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Okay. That's
and
where it fits
that's
in.
what it is. All those layers are basically just the same. What's this Pico?
Has to do with spelling bee. I like spelling bee.
I like spelling bee too. This is my dream. You can do all the spelling bee you want until your soul says otherwise.
You can find this podcast on all popular streaming services. Email us a dream today at contact@dreamspeak.us. Check out our YouTube channel for a free introductory dream course. Connect with DreamSpeak for even more learning. Our socials are in the description. Our theme music was composed by me, Rika. This podcast does not constitute medical advice. If you have concerns about your well-being, talk to your doctor or a mental health professional.